Hello everyone, this is Tom in Los Angeles. I hope you're doing well and thank you for coming back to this series of 100 videos for 100 cantos of the Divine Comedy. Today we're going to talk about Canto 15 of Purgatorio, which is yet another canto with no parallel. It's a canto that, at least if we think about all the 34 cantos of Inferno and the 14 cantos of Purgatorio that we've seen so far, it doesn't really have an equal, because it's such a unique canto that's suffused in tranquility, serenity. It's a relaxing canto, and it has a tone that is very much in harmony with the remaining parts of the Purgatorio, because what Dante did, he basically, we can say that he sandwiched this canto in between 14 and 16 that both have a very strong dramatic power, because they're talking about ethics and history, and they have a lot of intensity and a bit of bitterness from Dante's heart. And in the middle we have this Canto 15 that it's there almost as a composer like Beethoven or Brahms would write a movement of his symphony that makes the listener breathe mentally or spiritually in between much more furious and intense movements. So there is a musical harmony here in the slowing down of the pace. In fact, in this canto there is not even any, or there isn't much of a plot progression, only a little bit really. We're gonna see Dante and Virgil moving from the terrace of envy to the terrace of wrath. And so this is the part of let's say the half canto to add to the previous two that where we see Dante and Virgil on terrace of envy, and then they will move to the terrace of wrath. But nothing much happens aside from spiritual reflection and meditation between Dante and Virgil. This is why in my previous video for Canto 14 I mentioned that in my opinion I see this as a, and maybe it's an exaggeration, I completely realize that, but I see this almost as a Inferno and Paradiso type of comparison. Canto 14 had elements that I recognized as infernal, and I believe Canto 15 has elements of Paradiso, of how high and theological and spiritual and abstract sometimes the cantos in Paradiso will be. Another strong characteristic of Canto 15 is how everything is soaked in light in this canto. If you have already read it and you're going to reread it now, just pay attention to all the verbs, names, and terms that Dante uses to indicate light. Something that is shining, something that is reflecting, not only light, but light reflected, that has a really central significance and meaning in this canto. Almost every small section of the first part of Purgatorio 15 has something to do with a reflection or a mirroring of a concept of something. So to start with the very first lines where Dante is talking about time, we know how time is very central in Purgatorio. As many as the hours in which the sphere that's always playing like a child appears from daybreak to the end of the third hour, so many were the hours of light still left before the course of day had reached sunset. He's talking about the hours that the sun, who is here compared to the sphere that is always playing like a child. It's a little strange simile here, but many scholars are talking about, the majority of the scholars that I found, talk about the meaning of this simile as the sun like a child that is playing and is bouncing back and forth playfully between the two tropics, the Cancer and Capricorn, constantly going back and forth in a playful way as if he was a child. Maybe this is also a reference to how the sun was seen and talked about by astronomers in those times. To be clear, the reflection here is between morning and evening. So in order to tell us what's happening in the evening, which is there are 3 hours before 6 and therefore it's 3 in the afternoon, 3 p.m., Dante is referring to the morning. He's talking about daybreak. So there is already a reflection, a mirroring effect in the way he's explaining us about time. He also mentions where we are midnight. In Purgatorio, Dante, where he says we are where we are, that's always Italy, here where he's writing. And therefore, it's midnight in this moment in Italy. It's 3 p.m. in Purgatorio, but it remains the fact that there are 12 hours of difference between Purgatorio and Jerusalem, which is at the Antipodean point from Purgatorio. And therefore, in Jerusalem at this time is 3 a.m. 3 p.m. in Purgatorio. When sunlight struck directly at our faces, we already have seen light mentioned at least a couple of times in only a few lines. Sunlight struck directly at our faces, which in Italian Dante says per mezzo il naso, in the middle of our nose. That's a very peculiar way to say, but in the middle of our nose. And here we are, from verse 13 to verse about 24, 25, Dante gives us a long list of terms that have to do something with light and reflection and mirroring and the image itself, which is absolutely fascinating because it's a way for Dante to already foresee and give us the answer to the main question of this canto, of the first part of this canto, in advance, even before he asks the crucial question to Virgil. This question that he will ask has to do with a sentence that Guido asked him in the previous canto, Canto 14. And the answer is a complex theological point, not very complex to explain, but complex to really understand the reality of it and the truth of it. And so to heighten the meaning of that answer, Dante is giving us here already reflections and light bouncing back and forth to make us understand, to put us in the mood that will allow us to better understand the answer. But let's go with some order. First of all, this interesting portion where Dante is talking about light and reflections and everything. He says, I lift my hands above my brow to limit some of their excessive splendor. As when a ray of light from water or a mirror, it's interesting, water or a mirror, and he's been calling a lake a mirror before as well, so these are the most reflective surfaces that he can think of. Leaps in opposite direction and rises at an angle equal to its angle of descent, and to each side the distance of from the vertical is equal, and science and experiment have shown. It's he's bringing in science in this poetic simile, and he will do more and more of this, in particular in Paradiso. This is part of the reason why I'm saying this sounds like Paradiso. He's strengthening an argument using science inside his poetic simile. And this poetic simile is easy to understand. He's talking here about the law of reflection of the light. He's really talking about physics here, in a moment that we can argue that comes centuries before the official birth of physics in the world as a science, as an actual science. Dante's vision is overcome by a radiance that is greater than anything he's seen before. That's what he's saying. And so he addresses Virgil. He says, kind father, what is that against which I have tried in vain to screen my eyes? It seems to move toward us. And Virgil, don't wonder if you are still dazzled by the family of heaven. Speaking about the angels. A messenger has come and he invites us to ascend. Virgil is alluding to the fact that over time, in his progression, in his maturing into this journey, Dante's eyes will be more open to the purity of the angelic creatures, the messengers of God, and he will be able to see them more clearly. But right now, his vision is still too weak to be able to look at this light without feeling blinded and losing the sense of sight. We really are made to understand that there are some truths that are so radiant and powerful, that if we are not coming close to them with a genuine, deep, profound purity of heart and soul, we are not going to be able to really fully embrace them and understand them. With a glad voice, the angel told us, "Enter here. There are less steep than were the other stairs." It's the angel inviting them to the next terrace, basically. We climbed already past that point. Behind us, we heard Beati Misericordes sung, and then "Rejoice, you who have overcome." You see how the scheme that Dante is following for each terrace is very rigid, and it's always the same. There is the beatitude and then the singing before they can move on to the next terrace. In fact, right here, Dante doesn't say it, but it's around verse number 37, 38 that we are to assume that his second P, or letter P from his forehead, is cleansed by the angel. Virgil will let him know a little bit later in the canto, but here is where this happens. So we finally get to this crucial question of the canto, which gives the flavor and the color and the spiritual intensity to the entire canto 15. This is verse 43. I asked my master, what did the spirit of Romagna, meaning Guido, mean when he said sharing cannot have a part? And it's cool how in Italian, when Dante refers to Guido's words, he simply mentions two terms that Guido mentioned, and Virgil immediately understands. He only mentions divieto e consorte, which is in English prohibition and sharing. I would say from verse 49 to verse 57, we really have one of the central points of this canto, because we get to this concept of the divine multiplication. And the concept is that goodness and love are more reflected the more people possess them. So the more everyone loves, the more love there is to go around. This is the answer that Virgil is trying to explain to Dante. So what Guido said in Canto 14 precisely was, "O humankind, why do you set your hearts there where our sharing cannot have a part?" Guido is asking this question rhetorically, but it's almost as if he thought about us as children. Children struggle to understand how, sharing is better than having something all for themselves. Or even little dogs. I can see that in my dog. She wants all the toys for herself, and it would be impossible to explain to her that sharing is better than having everything for herself. So it's a very human instinct, a very, we could say, almost an animal instinct. But then Virgil explains the answer, which is one of the most central parts of this canto in verses 52 to 56, where he says, "For there, the more there are who would say ours, so much the greater is the good possessed by each, and so much more love burns in the cloister." Here is the point of the entire first part of the canto. Love is multiplied by God, just like light is multiplied by reflective surfaces. And now we can see really the point of all this talking about refraction, reflection, mirrors that Dante has been doing for 55 lines here in this canto. And I find it beautiful because it's almost as if somebody would be writing, holding this concept in his heart very, very close, so he cannot write anything else but something that has to do with the concept, because it's a strong spiritual concept. And at this point, Dante says, "I'm more hungry now for satisfaction than if I had held my tongue before. I have a doubt. How can a good that's shared by more possessors enable each to be more rich in it than if that good had been possessed by few?" So Dante presses the argument further, and he wants something more technical. In fact, we can say that Virgil here is reprimanding Dante gently, because he's saying, "You're still persisting letting your mind fix on earthly things. You're asking me this question because you're thinking about earthly things and not spiritual, divine things. Even from true light, you gather darkness. That good, ineffable and infinite, which is above, that's the divine light or God, directs itself toward love as light directs itself to polished bodies. Where ardor is, the good gives of itself. This is a really beautiful couple of terzines and tercets that ends with e come specchio l'uno all'altro rende. There is a va bene d'amare e più si ama come specchio dall'uno all'altro rende. The more to love well there, and they love more, and mirror-like, each soul reflects the other. It's something that doesn't work out if we use earthly arithmetic. And really, here we can go back to Harold Bloom, because he said Dante in some portions is St. Augustine versified. And he really is versified Augustine here, because St. Augustine in the City of God said the following. He said, "For the possession of goodness is not lessened by being shared. It's increased when it has many possessing it in one league and link of charity." So this is really the crucial theological point of this canto here. And so with a certain humility, at this point Virgil delegates the rest of the answer to Beatrice, just like he did a few cantos ago when it was the case to explain how an act of charity, of love, can eliminate some time in purgatorio. You know, for things that go beyond the strict logical reason, Virgil is starting to delegate those. He's saying Beatrice will be the perfect person to explain these things to you, because again, she is representing faith, and many fathers of the church have said that reason in itself, for certain topics beyond a certain level, cannot give us the comprehensive answer or the comprehensive understanding of a particular topic. Finally, here at verse 79, Virgil explains, maybe indirectly, that the second P has disappeared, because he says, now only strive so that the other 5 wounds may be cancelled quickly. So he now has only 5 from 7 that had been inscribed by the angel at the beginning of purgatory. Here at verse 82, the second part of the canto starts, and technically we are now stepping into the next terrace, the terrace of wrath. So we are done with the terrace of envy, and from verse 82 onward we are in the third terrace, or the terrace of wrath. Dante doesn't skip a bit, he doesn't wait, he doesn't hold on, he launches immediately in a series of very poetic and highly lyrical visions. They have to be thought of and enjoyed together with the vision of the carvings in the first terrace, and of course the sound, we can call them hallucinations, in the second terrace. Here, the meditations upon the virtue that is opposing the sin appear to Dante in the forms of visions. We can think of them as just Dante seeing them over there, as if they were almost holograms appearing out of nowhere. The first one, as always, is Mary. So here we have ecstatic vision. It's interesting how the word ecstatica is the only time that is used by Dante in the entire Divine Comedy, and he will never use it again. Interesting. Ecstatic vision, to see some people in a temple, and a woman just as at the threshold, in the gentle manner that mothers use, was saying, "Oh my son, why have you done this to us? You can see how we have sought you, sorrowing your father and I." This is Mary with St. Joseph, who both have been anxious because Jesus, as a kid, maybe 12-year-old, has been in the temple for a long time with the priest, assumedly, or praying, and they didn't know where he was. This passage is reported by Dante almost literally, with a couple of changes. In fact, "Oh my son" is not something that the Gospel is saying. And also the gentle manner the mothers use is an addition by Dante. It's very beautiful, in fact. It's giving us even more the sense of motherly love that Dante wants to convey. And what is this virtue that Dante is presenting to us as the opposite, the one annulling the strength of wrath? It's gentleness or meekness. We can call it meekness because we hear in the Beatitudes, blessed are the meek. And Mary here is a perfect example of meekness in the way she doesn't get angry at Jesus in a moment where she could have gotten angry, but she ponders things in her heart and in a gentle way reprimands him without giving into wrath or anger. The second vision is taken from mythology, and the third one is again taken from the New Testament. The second one talks about Pisistratus. Pisistratus was the prince of Athens who forgave a young man who hugged his daughter without permission. And this scene, a little strangely maybe, but probably with good reason, starts with a woman who is Pisistratus' wife, trying to encourage her husband to take revenge on this young man for the action that he's done. It's probably to, I don't know, but I'm thinking to contrast the behavior of Mary with the behavior of this woman, and also to contrast her ill intentions with the meek intentions and the meekness of her husband. The third vision is the very dramatic and touching and moving scene of the martyrization of Saint Stephen. Saint Stephen is called the proto-martyr because he was the very first martyr of Christianity. Only a couple of years after, or maybe 1 year or so after Jesus' crucifixion, he was preaching and in front of a crowd, and the Sanhedrin Pharisees, the Jewish priests, he had been contrasting them and talking about the resurrected Jesus, and it basically angered them, both the priests and the crowd. And the crowd wanted to kill him. They decided to stone him. So he gets stoned, but even during the stoning process, which is one of the most barbaric things, and to think that it's still in place in some countries in 2021 is astounding. They stone him, and while he is being stoned, he's actually praying. He's praying to God, and he's praying for his killers as well, looking up towards heaven. This scene from the Acts of the Apostles in the New Testament has generated many really lovely and gorgeous paintings, Christian paintings, all throughout centuries in Italy, but throughout Europe. I'm going to try and show at least a couple of them because they're so beautiful. So these three examples, these three visions are very important, maybe specifically important because Purgatorio is the cantica of forgiveness and mercy. And within meekness, mercy and forgiveness are almost involved and included. They are very much linked to each other as virtues: meekness, gentleness, and the ability to forgive people, to have mercy. Of course, Purgatorio is the cantica of mercy from God, but God is asking us to replicate this type of virtue at our human level. The canto ends with a continuation of dialogue between Virgil and Dante. Dante is recovering from these visions, and so he's almost going around as if he had been sleeping, or as Virgil says, "You can't walk straight. For more than a half league now you have moved with clouded eyes and lurching legs, as if you were a man whom wine or sleep." You look like a drunk. That's what Virgil is telling him. And Dante, "Oh my kind father, if you hear me out, I'll tell you what appeared to me when I had lost the right use of my legs." And Virgil says, "I understand you, my pupil. I understand very well what happened to you." We have a recovery of Virgil's maybe not authority, but the very high respect that Dante has for Virgil. He never lost it, but we've seen a bit of a roller coaster in how they're in the relationship. Dante has been seeing Virgil as authoritative and a real guide, or somebody who makes a lot of mistakes and is lost. In this canto, Virgil has a very high place and the right place of the teacher. In fact, Virgil explains that he didn't ask this question to Dante to understand what happened because he knew that, but he just asked him to say, hurry up, we need to move on, there is work to do, and I'm here as your spiritual director, so we have duties to tend to. You cannot just slow down, we need to go forward. The canto closes with a foresight of what's to happen in the next canto, which is this smoke that metaphorically is representing the smoke of wrath, of anger, for the wrathful souls. But we'll see this in the next canto, in the next video. Thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed the canto and the video, and we'll speak soon. Thank you.